Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Joyce, a board member at Stop Sexual Assault in Schools. And I'm here talking with Catherine Lalonde, who went through an excruciating experience when she was in high school with her school district and reporting sexual harassment and sexual assault, and has really been a trailblazer for what young people can do when it comes to making change in their schools, in their communities. So would you mind by starting just explaining what your experience was in high school?
So when I was growing up, I grew up in the DC suburbs, so very politically active, progressive community. And when I was in high school, I kind of had a reckoning with myself about experiences that I'd had with classmates of mine in terms of sexual harassment and assault in the classroom. When I was in middle school, there was a boy who would frequently grope me and touch me during class. And it wasn't until I was older that I kind of recognized how problematic that was, in a sense. And obviously at the time it made me very uncomfortable, but I didn't have the right tools to verbalize it. That there was a pattern of this behavior in terms of boys mistreating young women in class, in the classroom setting. It just made me really angry that there was kind of this accepted culture of people sexually assaulting us and harassing us in class, and that it was okay to just touch somebody in the school day. So I decided to report it through the Title IX system in my school because I realized that this was kind of a pervasive issue. And unfortunately, it was extremely traumatic to kind of have to go through that process. Instead of talking to a counselor, I was talking to school security guards who weren't necessarily the most well-trained people to talk about that experience of having gone through something so harrowing like that. And it got to the point where I was kind of signaled out among my classmates for having called out this group of boys that had been groping and harassing women throughout middle school and high school. During COVID, a bunch of other young women who were in my school district who'd actually gone through the same experience of Title IX kind of disrespecting their story, not really doing anything, and then making us kind of feel signaled out for coming forward with the story. And it was the fact that I was able to find comfort and support in other young women in high school who had gone through similar experiences to me, not only in terms of being assaulted, but also we had been mistreated by the school system in general, where we kind of formed an alliance of sorts and were able to move forward with activism against our school district in terms of kind of trying to change the system.
Could you describe a little bit, when you say I reported it to Title IX, what did that look like? How did you find the coordinator, and were they helpful?
And they were like, oh, this is actually something that's not allowed in school. You're not allowed to touch other people without their consent in school. Crazy that that's something that people don't know. And that's something that students can get in trouble for. And you should talk to your school counselor about it. And when I went to my school counselor, she immediately was like, we're going to go to the security guard now to document this as Title IX. And as somebody who is a mandated reporter myself for several jobs that I've had, I know that that's not necessarily how that's supposed to go. You're supposed to disclose this information ahead of time. And also students are supposed to feel comfortable being able to talk about this. And because it was a city school district, we had police officers, we had SRO officers in the building and stuff. And so I sat down with them and they basically gave me this blank piece of paper, asking me to write down the first and last names of all the other women that I had known that had been involved in this. And kind of, I did it because I thought that that's what I was supposed to do, but I didn't really understand at the time that I was kind of disrespecting the confidentiality of these other high school girls who had experiences of sexual assault. And so high school administrators talked to all these other women and basically were like, this girl named Catherine Lalonde told us that you have been sexually assaulted. Please write down your story now. And of course, none of these people were comfortable with sharing their story. They didn't want it to go through the Title IX system. I was the only one who actually wanted it to go through the Title IX system. But because I was so young and so uneducated about how the system worked, I just didn't really understand that by me telling them the names of these people, that they would automatically kind of insert them into the investigation process. I opened up to my parents about it, and they complained to the school district about how I was being treated. And it was only then that like I was really heard. My mom was like, what is wrong with this? Like, you know, I was watching it through her eyes as a young teenager. From watching her anger about it, I think that's kind of like where my anger stemmed from, because I realized that it just like wasn't okay. And my case kind of resulted in the fact that there was really nothing that they could do, because kind of the most severe incidences had happened so long ago, you know, 3 or 4 years beforehand. Like, I had gone through this whole process, and the only result that they said could come of it was that I wasn't going to have a class with him. And like, I'm literally in my first class, you know, August of 2019 or whatever. And it's like, he's sitting next to me in my class. It's like the assigned seat because our last names aligned. And so basically I'd gone through this extremely harrowing, re-traumatizing process for nothing. And so I think during the pandemic, all of a sudden on social media, there's this kind of like outburst of students coming forward with their experiences with not only sexual harassment and assault and abuse in the school system in terms of student on student, but also teacher on student. And then in addition, with the negative relationship between students and the Title IX process and investigative system. And it kind of felt for the first time in high school that like I wasn't alone. And I was at the time on the editorial board of my school newspaper. So we actually ended up using student journalism to kind of create several different investigative pieces that are award-winning about kind of this history that had existed in my school district. And kind of from those investigative pieces, I was like, I don't really want to end here. I don't want to end with the journalism that I'm writing about it. I actually want to fix the system. And it was only after that we graduated that we had the opportunity to do that, because while we were there, we couldn't really stand against our school district without really like facing some sort of backlash.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're a high school student in the midst of it, it must seem almost impossible to really change the system from within. But do you have, I mean, just given what you've gone through, do you have any advice for students who are in it now, being on the other side of it? What could they do to advocate if they find themselves in a position like you were in?
I think what I realized, and what I realize now, is that at first I felt very alone. And it wasn't until like social media kind of played a bigger role in telling stories about sexual assault and harassment that I realized that I wasn't alone. And so I think, honestly, there are lots of criticisms of social media, but it is because of Instagram and at the time Twitter that I was able to stand against my school district. And actually that like we were able to create a new system for our school district to report Title IX. And so I think like oftentimes it takes one person to kind of start that process. It takes one person to say something about it. And it can be really scary to be the first person to do it. And I felt really alone at the time when I was talking about it. But once I started talking about it, I found a community of other people that I had never even like met in person before. who had gone through the same experiences as me, and we became, you know, almost like comrades in this kind of like fight against this unjust system through social media. So I guess what I would say, A, you're not alone, and B, it takes a lot of bravery to make that first step. But once you make that first step, there will be other people who will join you.
I mean, in terms of making the changes at your school, did you have adults or administrators on your team?
I was really lucky in a sense that there were lots of teachers in my high school who also had recognized how incredibly messed up Title IX was in my school district, because teachers are also affected by Title IX. And so I did have teachers who were very much wanting to support me. And like, we were able to find teachers who were like, we will sit with you during your meeting with the administration and kind of back you and support you in the concerns that you're bringing up. And I think at first we were met with a lot of backlash from our principal, from the superintendent of our school district. And my school district is incredibly large. So it wasn't that my superintendent knew who I was, but the fact that there were teachers who wanted to support us gave us kind of a leg up. A group of us from our school newspaper who had done this investigative work started meeting with our school principal and other administrators at our school. When we were sitting with our principal was like, oh yeah, like, I hear you. I very much hear you. But like, nothing ever came of the concerns that we brought to her. And so it was like, oh yeah, I'm hearing you, but I'm not going to do anything about it because I don't want to. So during our senior year, we kind of created this plan. And then when I graduated, it's like a group of like 3 or 4 of us actually went to the head of Title IX for Montgomery County Public Schools. It's really easy, like, as a young person and as a young activist, to have such big ambitions for what you want. It's really, really hard to actually change these systems because they've existed for 50, 60 years. So it's not that it's impossible, but it's incredibly difficult. So if you can change one thing, it really does make a big difference. Our goal, you know, we had all of these ideas that kind of stemmed from personal experience. And the first one was that we wanted to educate people because it was the school system's fault that there was no education about it. So that was one of the things that we wanted to change. We wanted to kind of increase awareness and education about it. We also wanted to increase mental health support for students because there's kind of this like stigma about, you know, having experienced sexual assault and abuse and harassment. And then like not a lot of resources to navigate that, especially as a young person. It's incredibly challenging. It's incredibly confusing. And then lastly, we wanted to change the way that the reporting process worked. The problem is like Title IX can never be anonymous because it's a federal law. And so like if you're coming forward with the Title IX case, they're going to need your name, they're going to need your information to kind of investigate the case. Like most people that I talked to when I was doing my advocacy work were like, I don't want to go through the Title IX system because I don't want my name like dragged through the mud. What the heck? Like I don't want to have to do all of this like stuff. I just want to be able to like do it on my phone. And I was like, what if there was an app where students could just file the same report, but they could do it themselves, right? They could have some agency over the system. So what we ended up doing was creating an app that we kind of call a one-stop shop to resources. A graduate of Montgomery Blair High School with me. Through the app, we have our bullying, harassment, and intimidation form, where before you would have to speak to a reporter, a mandated reporter in the school district in order for that report to go anywhere. So now if you file this report online, it goes to the same system. You don't have to talk to somebody if you don't want to talk to them. And we also go through the entire Title IX process. So what is Title IX? You know, how was it created? What is it? How does it apply to you now? And what would happen if you had a case? We basically explain what is sexual harassment? What is sexual assault? What is sexual abuse? What is bullying? What is cyberbullying? What is intimidation? What is stalking? We go through all of these different forms of harassment that are covered under Title IX and explain them at like a 5th grade reading level so that anybody can understand that. The last part of the app is really that it provides this mental health support. We have created a database of all the different resources where students can go to receive mental health support and assistance after, having reported through Title IX or through having experienced sexual assault or abuse or harassment. And obviously, like, my school district advertised it as a mental health support app, which I think is really interesting because I think it just goes to show that they don't necessarily want to admit that the system was flawed and that we were trying to change the flawed system. But regardless, we were able to work with them to do something about it. And they listened to us, and they actually let us create this app. And now, across all of our schools, there's QR codes that you can scan to download the app. I really would hope that it's giving people at least a better place where they can go with this information without feeling stuck.
Could you speak a little bit to the national problem there and how you think what you've done in your community could maybe be replicated?
Yeah, I think that there is this bigger issue of the fact that we don't talk about sexual harassment, assault, and abuse nearly enough. It is so stigmatized in our country. And I also think that it's people don't want to talk about the fact that young kids are getting assaulted in school because it makes them uncomfortable. But the truth is that that's happening. And so I think that the first kind of issue that I see is the fact that there is such little comfortable conversation about how this needs to change in the first place. And when I found SSAIS, it was oh my gosh, the heavens have opened, because it's wow, there's actually an organization that their sole goal is to bring awareness to the fact that this is a very serious issue in our school districts. The idea that you can actually create change through using technology to educate people is really important. And I think that is something that can be replicated. And I think it's really important that it is, because we want people to feel comfortable knowing and learning about this stuff. And I think that that's really the core of the issue, is that there's just so much misinformation about it. And so that creates the stigma. At least for me, I felt like I had this huge weight on my shoulders that I had to change everything because I didn't want another girl to experience what I'd gone through. But I'm realizing it's okay. It's okay if you can't change everything. It's okay if you can't, reroute the entire system, but at least doing a small thing such as creating this app or speaking out against your school district will still make it will still make that small impact that eventually kind of has that ripple effect to change the system as a whole. But you can make an incredible difference by doing whatever small thing that you can do.
That's really well said. And I totally agree. I think you're right. We're all working toward change and making our own little contributions. Thank you so much for speaking with us today, Catherine. It has been really enlightening and inspiring. And we've all gotten such good ideas and motivation just from hearing what you've been through and how you've turned it into something so positive. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.